So I'm delighted to be joined by former Kerry player and former Kerry manager Éamonn Fitzmaurice. Éamonn, thanks very much for coming on. We're just finished the inter-county season anyways for 2022. But I suppose from a personal point of view, how are you keeping yourself?
I'm good, Dara. Yeah. Obviously, it's been a good season for Kerry, so we're all happy down here in the kingdom, and the living is easy at the moment. So yeah. So in general, I thought the season was very enjoyable. But obviously, for Kerry people, that Kerry came out on top in the end, it made it that bit more enjoyable, and just seeing full crowds back and seeing full Crow Park and things like that again was great after the couple of challenging years. And I imagine for the players and the managements themselves being able to prepare as they'd be used to preparing, well, it must have been nice as well compared to all the restrictions that were there for the last couple of years, particularly for the 2020 season. But no, in general, an enjoyable season, I have to say.
Yeah, because even the buzz, obviously, up in Roscommon, you can't get the full idea what's the pictures down in Kerry, but it seemed like the crowd really took to this team this year. Even the Tralee, the crowd was huge by the looks of the videos, and even the celebrations after the Dublin win in the manner of that, and after the All Ireland, like 8 years is it a famine in Kerry, but even after yourselves won it in 2014, you really appreciate an All Ireland when it comes around. You have to wait that long, especially for this team that haven't won one yet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the point, is it's that gap. When the gap is there, it makes it very special because Jack referenced the 97 team. He was a selector with Paddy that time, and he referenced the crowd as being similar to that time, which was after a breakthrough as well. I felt in 2014 it was something similar. There was a massive crowd altogether, and there was huge goodwill all over the county because of the bit of a gap that had been there, and possibly because maybe we weren't expected to win it that year. And obviously this year then with a new young team that had been on the go for the last couple of seasons, hadn't quite got there. Everyone within Kerry knew that the talent was there, but at the same time, getting the job done is a different thing. So I think because of that, there was huge joy, and just there was relief as well, but there was just a great happiness all over the county, and there would have been that appetite within the county to see those lads do well and win an All Ireland. So thankfully that's happened, and obviously for the young lads it's great, but also for the senior players that had stuck at it, the likes of David Moore and Paul Ganey, Stephen O'Brien, Paul Murphy, that would have all been there in 2014. David would have been there in 2009 as well. It was a great reward for them, because I'm sure, particularly for David over the last season or two, with the injuries he's had and everything, he probably weighed everything up. So, there was a general just happiness for all involved.
Yeah, you mentioned relief there. Was there even more pressure seeing Dublin on the slide a bit, like this year and last year, obviously losing to Mayo, that this nearly felt like it was Kerry's time, that, your David Clifford, Sean O'Shea's were that maybe in around that 23 mark, like there was more experience, they've been there 3 or 4 years. Like, was that the feeling that this really was not make or break, because they're still young, but, you get that feeling as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was, look, Dublin there for a period of, kind of from maybe 2016, well, even earlier, probably from 2013 kind of on, you almost had to be perfect to beat them. And they had to play a bit below themselves, which happens so rarely. So the fact that Dublin have come back into the pack a bit has definitely opened it up for everyone. And there was obviously major disappointment in Kerry last year, seeing Dublin knocked out in the other semi-final, and Tyrone beating Kerry then, and Tyrone going on and winning the All-Ireland. Not that it came out of nowhere, because to be fair to Tyrone, they'd been knocking on the door as well, and they'd been in semi-finals and finals against Dublin where they hadn't quite got it over the line. So they had been a coming team as well, but there was certainly a feeling in Kerry with Dublin knocked out that it was a missed opportunity. So the bit of pressure, like I always think, and I know I heard Jack mentioning it after the game, that there was a lot of pressure on the lads externally, but I would imagine even within the group they were putting a lot of pressure on themselves, that they felt it was their time. And we mentioned Mayo there was an unbelievable Mayo team from 2011 up until this year, and they never quite managed to get it over the line. Now, in fairness, they were coming up against that great Dublin team year in, year out, but at the same time, it just shows how cruel sport can be and that there are no guarantees. So there would have been an anxiousness, I'm sure, from the players and within the county, but at the same time, there was an appreciation that they would get there at some stage. And in fairness to Jack and the management, they just tweaked a couple of bits and pieces this year that helped the lads get over the line.
Yeah, I mean, the general championship itself, like, it's going to be changing again next year, the structure. It probably didn't really fully kick off until maybe that Armagh Galway game, would be fair to say that, that game kind of caught everyone's imagination, and then we got the Kerry Dublin, a good final. But it's almost like you think the championship is great after it's finished, but the provincials are usually hit and miss. So, like, would you agree with the provincials even taking more of a back step next year with the round robin coming in?
I think so, yeah. And look, in fairness, I was fortunate enough, on the RTE kind of games that I got this summer, even from a personal perspective, leaving the Kerry bit aside, any of the games that I was at, I was very lucky, because I was at the Galway Mayo game in the first round of the Connacht Championship, which was a great game above in Castlebar. I was at the Connacht final, which was a very good game. I was at Tyrone and Derry in Omagh, which was obviously a huge breakthrough for Derry, and it was a great game to be at. And Tyrone were beaten as All-Ireland champions in their home patch. I was at Tyrone and Armagh above in the athletic grounds, which was another great game. So I had been fortunate that almost nearly every weekend I seemed to get the game that ended up being a very good game and a very even game. So my experience was, by the time I got to Croke Park and the Armagh Galway game, I had been at a good few very good games over the summer anyway. But I can imagine if you were at every Kerry game, for example, Cork put up a good battle for 50 minutes. They were always going to beat Limerick. Even the Mayo game was a bit flat after the Armagh Galway game. So it did take until the semi-final until that really kicked off. But you'll be hoping next year now with the round robin and the 4 groups of 4 that the teams will be quite evenly matched, and there will be a lot of those good games throughout the summer, even if the schedule is going to be very crowded and hectic and everything else. And as you said, I think it will be interesting to see how managements approach it. Are they going to be, very sparing in how they use their players in the provincial championships to make sure that they are ready for the round robin, especially the Division 1 teams, because even if they don't get the provincial final, they're bound to be in the top 16, so they'll be okay by being in Division 1. So I think that will definitely be an interesting part of next summer. But I think by default, eventually what's going to happen is that the provincial championships, their importance are almost going to be taken away in disguise, that it's almost happening in front of our eyes without a big deal being made out of it. So that's probably going to happen over the next season or two.
Yeah, I mean, probably football is in a better place than it was before. I mean, I think we're seeing maybe a bit more kicking, a bit more attacking play, despite what people might say about the Derry Galway game and certain examples of that. But I mean, you see a team like Galway suddenly that, I from Roscommon, we would have seen ourselves at the same level as Galway a couple of months ago, and now they nearly seem like they're in maybe the top 3. Maybe probably Dublin are still ahead of them, but the pack is coming in a bit. Kerry obviously probably have more improvement, but you're seeing Derry, Armagh, like, teams are starting to think we can get to a semi-final anyways, and who knows what could happen after that. At least we're at that stage now.
Oh, big time, yeah. And there is, like, obviously you had your 4 semi-finalists this year, and you'd have to say the 4 semi-finalists are all going to be very much there again next year. And then outside that, you had the likes of Armagh. Tyrone were the defending All-Ireland champions, and they just never rose the gallop this year. I imagine that they'll be very driven next year to show, I wouldn't subscribe to this thing that it was a lucky All-Ireland, or they were, that they were a bit fortunate, or they just came right at the right time. Like I said, they had been knocking on the door, but they certainly didn't defend their title appropriately this year. So there'll be massive drive within that squad. You have Armagh outside that final 4. You've Donegal, you've Roscommon, you've Mayo. So you easily, without even thinking about it, you have 7, 8 teams that are all going to be fancying their chances. And I think what will happen is, okay, some of the teams that are outside the top 2 or 3, they mightn't quite win in All Ireland, but they can take anyone out on a given day. And that can have a huge effect on, even the way a semi-final lineup could end up going, because 2 big teams could end up finishing, as in second spot, or they could end up playing each other in a quarter final. It can have an effect out of the group like that. So that's where I think that Dublin coming back into the pack does make it very interesting, because it was always very competitive between everyone else. But when you got to play Dublin, we went quite close a couple of times. Mayo went very close a couple of times, but to beat them, you had to be perfect, and nobody was able to be perfect against them. So I think that is definitely the big change.
Yeah, and even the introduction of the Tailteann Cup this year, I thought was actually very good to see. And the celebrations of Mullingar after Westmeath, like, I knew it would be a good thing to win, but even I was actually shocked to see how much they celebrated on the pitch that day and back in Mullingar. Like, even that's given life into so many more counties. Now, there probably still is a problem with that competition. Maybe the bottom end of Division 4 to the top end Division 3, there's probably another gap there, but at least it's injected a bit of life into them counties in the the lower divisions.
Oh, big time. And it was a brilliant competition, and the football in it was the games that I saw certainly were very open and fierce attacking football, and a lot of very good football. And the fact then that it was Division 3 and Division 4 teams, there were more mistakes being made in possession, which made for, better entertainment for neutral, because the ball was being turned over and it was going up and down the field at a rate of knots. So I thought it was an excellent competition. It was a huge success. As you mentioned, all the GA has to do next year in terms of selling it is show the scenes in Mullingar and on the pitch afterwards. And okay, there might be a bit of a difference between the bottom of 4 and the top of 3, but at the same time, I think most people, including myself, would have gone for Cavan at the start of the competition, that they were, that they were just probably almost a bit too good to be in it, and that they'd win it. And then the likes of Westmeath came along and won it, to show that, there isn't always this kind of predictable straight narrative there. And I saw Westmeath a couple of times. I saw their semi-final. I saw one of their earlier games, and I was at the final as well. And they were excellent. Like, they're a really good team, really well balanced. They have an excellent manager in Jack Cooney, good coaching staff as well. So they'll improve hugely for that run this year, and it'll be interesting to keep an eye on them next year. I imagine their first priority is to get out of Division 3, but even the bonding and the team spirit and everything that'll grow out of that, I'm sure they've been taking the cup around a bit, and there's a contribution to a holiday for them and all that stuff. That builds a team and it builds a group. So, if Westmeath continue and do very well in the league next year, I think that's a further kind of encouragement for teams to really go for the Tailteann Cup, and I expect them to.
Yeah, like, moving on to yourself, playing career-wise, I think was it the late sort of 90s you came into the Kerry senior team, was it?
Yeah, I came in. I played a couple of league games at the end of 96. It would have been my first year under 21. I played a couple of league games towards the end of 96, the start of 97. And I would have been on the fringes of that 97 squad. The lads that went on and won the All Ireland, for training matches. I would have been in and out and that kind of stuff. And I played with the juniors in 97. And then from 98 on, I was on the senior squad proper. And I made my debut in 98 and kind of went from there then. So, yeah, I suppose in modern terms, when you look at players going in now, that it can take a couple of years to get used to it or whatever. I was probably in there quite a young age, but that was more the way it was at the time. And we'd won a couple of under 21 All Ireland. So, our group was always kind of going to be feeding into it. So it happened naturally.
Yeah, and you probably saw even the change in the game from like playing and into management. Like, I'm sure the intensity was the same, but even just was the professionalism, you could see the game changing probably through the years yourself, from the playing and then into management.
Big time, yeah. I mean, it's a conversation we've had a couple of times with the lads. I think the way they're doing it now, it's so professional. I'd love to be doing it in that regard, because the model we kind of had was we trained 3 times a week when I would have started out Tuesday, Thursday, and one of the days at the weekend, or sometimes coming up the championship, we might have trained Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday when we were going hard at it. But we trained very, very hard. We really ran hard more than anything. And there was no gym or anything on the Tuesday or on the Monday or Wednesday or the in-between nights, because you were too tired. You were wrecked from the session the night before. So you were kind of recovering for the next session, and you go hard again, and then you recover for the next session. So that's the way the model was back then. And obviously, like when you see the level of fitness in all teams now, and the level of conditioning, and there's no one carrying a few pounds, or everyone is really well conditioned. It shows where the game has gone. But sometimes I hear people harking back for the way the game was when they were playing, and of course I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I thoroughly enjoyed playing with all the lads that I was involved with, because there were some great characters there and we great times. But I'd love to be a player in a modern setup where you're really hitting the top in terms of your athletic ability, and then trying to play your football as well. So there was huge changes, obviously, from when I started playing up until now, or when I finished in the management. But it's all been progressive. It is demanding, but I think a player at that who's at that end of the game wants to be. They're demanding themselves, and they want the best, and they want to be the best. So I think it's quite healthy. I know there was the ESRI report a couple of years ago, and there was concern about how much time lads are putting into it. And there's obviously an important balancing act there, and the split season is probably going to help that a bit. But in general, I'd love to be a player and playing in the modern game and doing and preparing the way that the lads do.
Yeah, is that probably why it's hard to nearly even compare players in different eras, like say Canavan in the 90s, Gooch in the noughties, and now we have David Clifford, for instance, who, like, obviously I can only go off who I've seen, but he's probably already the greatest player I've ever seen play. But in that kind of way, that say Peter Canavan now in a modern day setup, you don't know what he could have even just gone on that bit more. So it's just hard to compare eras in football, anyways.
It is, and I always think that sometimes when you look back at the older games and you see fellas kicking in wides and into the goalie's hands and kicking the ball away, you'd be kind of saying, geez, that's rubbish. Like, if they did that nowadays, they'd nearly be taken off. But it was a different game back then. And like, if you take the likes of Canavan or Gooch, or if you put them at their peak into teams now, the way they're playing, they'd still be brilliant. They'd still be at the top of their, they'd still be the best players in the game. I think the one thing that they'd probably find different, it was there for Cullen by the end of his career, but Peter Canavan wouldn't have played against a really defensive setup. He would have played against teams that would have been keeping an eye on him and dropping a sweeper in front of him, but he wouldn't have played with kind of 12, 13 bodies in his space and trying to get space there. But like I said, I still think that they would be brilliant. They'd be still brilliant in the modern game. And if you take the likes of David Clifford and you put him back 20 years, he'd still be brilliant in that era as well. That you just have those talents, and they transcend generations. But in terms of comparing them, I think it is hard, because you're comparing two completely different games, even from 10 years ago, not a mind 20 years ago. Yeah. It's just, if you look back at the 2011 or 2012 All-Irelands, it's a different game, like.
Yeah, and even yourself, like comparing yourself as the player and the manager, you would have started with Kerry as a manager, like quite young. Like, was it any different? Like, what the differences between pressure? Would you rather been on the field still, or even just getting used to being on the sideline, like in your own mindset, we'll say?
Yeah, I suppose like the thing that kind of helped me, Dara, was that I was a selector with Jack for 2 years in 2009 and 2010. And that kind of transferred me from being a player to the management side of things. And prior to that, and prior to Jack ringing me, I'd have had no ambitions in management, or I would have had no plan in my head. I know some players now, when they finish up, they want to get in and they're very certain about it, and they've a kind of a pathway in their head. But I wasn't like that at all. I was always involved in school teams at school, and that was about the size of it. I never thought of managing Kerry or being involved in Kerry at any age level. But Jack got on to me, and I got in with him then, and I spent 2 years as a selector, and obviously learned a huge pile. But in that period, I moved from being a player to the management kind of side of things, and then I had a year as the under-21 manager as well. And after that, then Jack finished up, and I think it was probably a bit early for me, and I think everyone, the county board probably felt they would have loved if I'd had another year under 21 under my belt. But those were the circumstances. And when you're asked to do that job, when they came to me and asked me to do it, I was thinking about it, and I was wondering, was I too young and was I ready and everything else? But then you just stand back and you say, look, you have to have a go at this, and you might not be asked again, because you just never know. It's funny. Football management is very like the stock markets, that when your stock is up, everyone wants a piece of you, but when your stock is down, then you don't be long going to the bottom of the pile. So I was aware of that as well. So I decided to go for it. I was only just after turning 35 at the time. So I'd say Tomás O'Shea, who's a great friend of mine, who would have been a roommate. He was a year younger than me, and he would have been the eldest player on the team for the following season. So, fellas that I played with and everything else. But at the same time, we were all used to me being at the management side of it, because of the couple of years I've been a selector, which probably helped me.
Yeah, because you mentioned the selector thing there. Like, that was probably a key thing, like breaking away from being Éamonn Fitzmaurice, the player, to you're on the management now. Because again, you would have, as I said with Tomás there, you would have had them bonds over the years, and suddenly you're managing the players. So it probably did help in that way, that you broken away from the player side, and you were into the groove of the management at least.
Big time. And I mean, like, when I was a selector, there was fellas older than me on the team. Dara Shea, who'd be a great friend of mine as well. He's two years older than me, and he would have been still on the team in 2009. And I was there as a selector, like, so it was kind of small bit unusual, but at the same time, like, when you're involved in any group, really, all everyone wants to do is the best they can for the team, and whether that's being the best player on the field, or being a role player who's just doing their job, or if you're involved in the management or the backroom team, doing whatever you can to help get the lads over the line. That's all that counts, really. And I think once there's an acceptance of that, everyone is kind of happy with that then.
Yeah, and then like 2013, probably the semi-final with Dublin is always going to be iconic, and I suppose that was when you really got introduced to, like, this is the real stuff. And like, Dublin were flying at the time as well. Like, most people, fancied them. I mean, I think they won by 6 or 7 in the end, which is crazy to think. But like, to get that close to them, it probably spurred you on as well to come back and win the All-Ireland the year after. That you nearly got that taste. That was like a proper All-Ireland final, even though it was only the semi-final that day.
It was a brilliant game, and like, we really fancied ourselves that day. We'd no fear going up. We knew how good Dublin were. That was Jim Gavin's first year, and they were playing unbelievable attacking football, and they'd won the league and everything else. But we'd had a plan from the start of the year of getting the team together and getting everyone right for that stage of the season. And Cullum was playing centre forward, which was a new lease of life for him, and it was giving us something different. And we just felt we were ready for us. One or two things went against us in the lead into the game. We had an AVB game the week before, and Killian Young broke his ankle in that, and he would have been centre back in the team. So he was obviously a significant loss. But on the day, I think in the 69th minute, we had a shot to go ahead.
Yeah.
Can't remember who it was. Maybe
it was Declan O'Sullivan, I think. Yeah.
Declan had a shot, and it just tailed wide. And the next kick out, then I remember thinking on the line, this is up for grabs. Whoever wins this is a great chance. And we actually, Dave Moore and Mark O'Shea, we had plenty of players under the ball, but whatever happened, it broke sideways. And in fairness to Michael Darren McCauley, you know, brilliant player and a fella I'd have huge respect for, a player I'd have huge respect for. He dived full length and panned the ball into McMenamin's path, and McMenamin got the goal. But that was a huge moment in that match and in that rivalry. And Michael Darren McCauley, you know, it kind of summed up the type of player he was. But we knew we were very close. Dubs got that goal, and I think Owen O'Gara got a goal almost from the next kick out, and we were well beaten in the end, but we knew we were very close, and we were bitterly disappointed because, like I said, we felt we were going to win that day, and we had played quite poorly against Cavan in the All-Ireland quarter-final, and you know, like you said, Dubs really were hot favourites, and that suited us perfectly because we knew there was way more in us, and certainly in fairness to the players, they gave it everything that day, and we just didn't quite get there in the end. But it was a brilliant game, and it was a brilliant occasion. It's one of those ones you'd like to come out the right side of, but it wasn't to be.
Yeah, I mean, and then the following year against Mayo in the semi-final, like another two crazy games, the one in Croke Park as well, like cruising, Lee Keegan sent off, and then Mayo do what Mayo do with the chaos. And then Kieran Donaghy came on and kind of just changed the game. But at the time, again, like probably with Kieran as well, it felt like he was nearly on the way out a good few years, and yet he kept staying on. Like, was that always in the back of your mind to use him as like, I wouldn't say an emergency plan, but just a completely new dimension, and it worked a treat that day.
Yeah, and look, in fairness to Kieran, he had been carrying an injury earlier in that year, and the thing just had taken off without him. And I remember after the quarter final, we beat Galway in the quarter final, and he didn't come on that day, and he was bitterly disappointed. He was really, really disappointed, and he's a complete team player and a complete squad player. But you know, it was nearly the first time in my life I saw him that it was obvious how disappointed he was. So we had a chat before training the following Tuesday night, and you know, he let me know that he was annoyed and he felt he should have got game time and everything else. And he asked me what I needed him to do, and I can still remember the conversation. I said to him, "Look, we're going to play you out in the middle of the field for the next week or two just to get your confidence back up again, and I need you to work. I need you to tackle." And almost with temper for the following 2 weeks, he was ripping the heads off fellas in training, and he got his game going again, I think, in the middle of the field, because when you're inside in the full forward line and you're a target man, it's very all or nothing. If you're winning the ball and you're on and you're playing well, everything's hunky dory. But if the ball's coming in, it's being broken away from you and you're not getting on ball, it's hard to build a bit of form then. So by going out to the middle of the field, he was handling ball, he was kicking ball, he was getting up and down the field, and I think his confidence came back. And the day of the Mayo game, he actually came on in the middle of the field. Initially, we brought him on just as Cillian O'Connor was taking the penalty that put them, I don't know how much ahead. And I was saying to him, "Look, we're going to need you now. We're going to need a bit of leadership." And I think they got another point almost straight after that. So we just put him in then, and the rest is history. But it kind of sums up his character and his, you know, he's just a winner, and he'll always compete until the bitter end. And he won a good free before the ball that he won to set up James. And James was obviously playing out of his skin that year, and he really stuck the goal well because there wasn't a whole lot of space where he put it. But we were lucky at the first set, to be honest, because like you said, we were cruising at half time, and Mayo did what Mayo do, and with their heart and everything else, we were really on the brink. But we had a fantastic spirit in that group, and not just that year. All of the years I was involved, there was a great togetherness, and there was a never say die attitude, and it worked for us some days, like that day, and there was other days against the Dubs in particular where it didn't work for us. But it's one thing I'd be kind of proud of with that group, that fellas always stuck together and always kept going to the end, and always tried to win the game, even when it was obvious that there were days it wasn't going our way. But that day we were lucky that day. But the second day in Limerick, I think we played probably a bit better than Mayo. Again, we had, you know, the Cillian O'Connor and Aidan O'Shea got injured, and there was a couple of things went our way, which has to go your way if you're going to win those big games. But I thought we played really well the second day. So it was a great win for us, great win for the group.
Yeah, I mean that game in Limerick is probably iconic because it was a great game, but it was probably the Limerick factor as well, the Gaelic grounds that it's so memorable. Like probably semi-finals should be kept in Croke Park and the final, but even quarter-finals, like does that, if you even look at that game, does that not give you, the provincial ground feel, like whether it be Cavan, Limerick, Portlaoise, them sort of grounds that you can pack the place out, that the town gets a good buzz Saturday evening or Sunday, a big quarter final. Like, do the GA probably have to look at that? Because if you just look at that game in itself, that's the selling point for a provincial ground straight away.
Big time. And, it's like we've played, and I've played them and myself in quarter final games, in particular in Croke Park, where you've 30,000 in there, and it's like a morgue in there. It's so quiet. It actually affects the game because the atmosphere is so flat. It just plays differently. Whereas obviously every player wants to play in Croke Park. There's a magic. Now, we were disappointed straight after the game in 2014 when we were told, look, lads, the game's on the Gaelic grounds, there's American football on here next weekend, or what was it, American football that was on?
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
That whatever was on in Croke Park, and that, so we were disappointed, and we were kind of going, Jesus, this is a joke and everything else. But we parked it straight away. We just said, look, it's on in Limerick now, and that's it, and we have to get ready for Limerick. So, we weren't huge fans of it beforehand, but obviously the occasion it became then, and it was a Saturday evening, and people had a few pints, and it added to the atmosphere, and there was an unbelievable crowd at it, and the Kerry crowd invaded the pitch afterwards, and it was a really memorable occasion. But there absolutely is an argument for, and again with the round robin thing that we have next year, that there's going to be home away and there's going to be a neutral venue. Like, use those provincial grounds for the neutral venue, and you'll get the local kind of interest as well there. And if you have 20 or 30,000 at a ground, then it's packed and there's a great atmosphere, rather than kind of a funereal Croke Park.
Yeah, I mean that weekend in itself, because the next day it was the Donegal Dublin game, and not to say now you would be thinking straight away it was Dublin, but probably in the back of your heads you were probably planning it was going to be Dublin again, and then Donegal just probably shock everyone and take the all-conquering Dublin out. Like, did that change the preparation much at all going into that final, that suddenly it was Donegal, completely different system to what Dublin would have brought to the table anyways?
It did. It changed completely the way we prepared for the couple of weeks, and we were expecting Dublin. Yeah, we would have been going up that morning, and we would have been, myself and the management drove up from Limerick on the Sunday morning, and we were, we knew that Donegal were really going to put it up to them. But at that time, Dublin were playing so well, it was just hard to see them being beaten. And even early in that game, they missed a load of chances, and they could have almost been out of sight by half time. But in fairness to Donegal, their plan really worked that day. But on the way down, we knew that we were going to have to play differently against them. We had a chat in the car on the way down. We were kind of set on what we were going to do. And then that was what our training was for the following two and a half weeks, that everything was about the kind of system that Donegal brought, and how we were going to deal with it, and how we were going to set up to make sure that they weren't playing the game on their terms. And it was actually very enjoyable, because at that stage of the season, having a fresh challenge and a fresh kind of approach to freshen up the training was brilliant. And as well as that, then over the two Mayo games and the extra time, nearly all of the squad had seen action. So everyone felt like that they could start or be a factor in the All-Ireland final. So it meant that the training was really at a fantastic level. But it was a seriously enjoyable couple of weeks of training and trying to crack the code and tweaking what we were doing the whole time. And by the time we got to the week before the game, we felt we were ready, and we felt that we had a great chance of beating Donegal. And no more than Dublin at the time. Donegal came in 2011, but in 2012 they were incredible. 2013, it was like that they ran out of a bit of juice after winning and the celebrations and everything, but they were back to their best again in 2014. So they were a serious team at that time, and thankfully on the day we did enough, and I'd say they were probably disappointed with the way that they played, possibly that they played a bit underneath themselves. But no, it was a great win for us.
Yeah, I mean, probably final wise, it probably wasn't the all free flowing attacking football that maybe all the neutrals would like to see. But does that show their finals are there to be won? And I'm sure Kerry and the team didn't care how you won that game. Whereas in the year before, classic against Dublin, what you lose, and you get nothing for it. So them games are there to be won and not put on a show for everyone at home.
Yeah, well, you took my point. That's exactly what I was going to say. We've been involved in plenty of classics in 2013 and 2016 was another classic semi-final against Dublin. But when you come out the wrong side of those, it doesn't matter to you that they were brilliant games. You're just gutted to have lost. You're aware, of course, look, it was a great game and everything else, but you're still analysing it and saying, what could we have done better? How did we lose it? So we weren't worried. The only small disappointment I had about 2014 was we pretty much nailed everything we tried to do, except our long range shooting was the only thing that we practiced a good bit in the lead into the game, and we had a lot of good long range shooters. But on the day, for whatever reason, we kicked 6 or 7 wides that I would have expected, and I'm sure the lads themselves would have expected to have got. And if we had kicked those, we would have won very comfortably, and it would really have been kind of the perfect performance from us from what we set out to do. But we didn't. And at the end, again, that bit of fortune. I remember Michael Murphy broke through. He tried to drive through the middle, and the ball broke, and Colin McFadden palmed the ball, and it came off the outside of the post. Yeah. And if they got back and equalised with us, and even if they'd forced it to a replay, we would have been so disappointed because we got so much right on the day, and the kind of surprise element that we had that day would have been gone for the replay, and it would have been a different conversation. So, we had a bit of good luck, but like you said, I'd say for most neutrals, it was a very forgettable final, and it's not one that sticks in the memory, but obviously for us, it was a special win.
Yeah, was the problem maybe for yourself that time, it was the transition wise, that maybe that team was obviously older than this current Kerry crop would have been, that you would have maybe had to transition more players by the end of your time as well, with the likes of David Clifford, Seanie O'Shea. Like, it was probably a transitional period as well, the years you were there as manager.
It was, but I think, to be fair, Dara, every team is transitioning all the time. Yeah. I think you're always trying to, again, if you look at the Dubs that were so good in that period, Jim Gavin always brought in at least 1, if not 2 or 3 fellas every year to freshen up the team. So I think you're always transitioning it. I think, in fairness to our lads, we always really gave everything, and we came up short the other years, but at the same time, we were competing against probably the best team of all time, with the best manager and management of all time. So they were a hard group to beat, and we competed with them the whole time. The age profile of the team was different. We had a lot of younger players, and we had a share of older players. There was probably a bit of a gap in the middle for a while, but bit by bit, by the time I'd left, a lot of the younger lads, the likes of Seanie O'Shea and David Clifford, Brianna Biogliach, Tyg Morley, Tom Sullivan, all that crew, they had come in, Gavin White, and they got experience, and they were kind of ready to kick it on to the next level. So I think you're always transitioning, and I think it'll be something that Jack will be looking to do next year. He'll be looking to add another couple of players to the squad and try and make sure there's competition in the team. But like I said, we were up against an unbelievable Dublin team that time, and an unbelievable Mayo team, and trying to get over both of those to win the All-Ireland was challenging.
Yeah, because even in that 2016 final, or not final, semi-final against Dublin, the clucks and kickouts, it was such a big factor in Dublin's play, and you had Dublin on the ropes then for that 10 minutes before the end of the first half. Like, it's hard to obviously practice a clucks and kick out in training because it's Cluxton and he's so pinpoint with them. But are you just practicing zones the whole time, setting traps, pushing up when not to? Is it that complex, them details? And you got the reward for, I think Darren O'Sullivan got that goal on the Cluxton kick out on that occasion anyways.
Yeah, we spoke about the Donegal preparation there a couple of minutes ago. It was something similar for that kick out, the preparation we put in for that kick out and the lead into that Dublin game, because we felt, as good as Cluxton is, we just felt that, look, this hasn't been seen before. This is going to be a complete surprise, that when he looks up and he sees 12 Kerry players pushed up into his half and into his kicking zone with only two Kerry backs at the other end of the field. You know, we see it quite common nowadays, but at that time, we figured there was going to be a shock factor in it for Dublin, that they were
Yeah,
just going to be looking around saying, what the hell is going on here? We haven't seen this kind of an approach before, because, you know, they would have seen teams trying to go man and man in them. They would have seen six, you know, zoning it up front. But as you said, Cluxton was so good, six wasn't enough, because he picked the
yeah,
holes with six up there. So we pushed, you know, 12, and it was something we practiced with zones. And again, it was something we tweaked. And you know, if anything, half time came at the wrong time for us that
yeah,
day, because the whole stadium was kind of behind us. You know, for once, the Kerry's voices were kind of outnumbering the Dublin voices. The momentum of the game was with us. Um, we got the second goal. It felt like that we were really in a flow, and then halftime came. And in fairness to Dublin, and again, it was compliments to Jim Gavin and those set of players. They were brilliant at fixing problems at halftime. And in the second half, it was an amazing thing, like that. I think maybe one, or was there even any, we were ready at halftime to do it again in the second half, because we figured they can't just fix this at halftime. That we needed a scoreable free to get it set up. That was the only way you could get it set up, because Cluxton had the ball out too quickly otherwise. So we might have got one. I don't know, did we even get one? But we didn't get more than one anyway. We didn't get scoreable frees where the ball was definitely going to go dead, and we could push up and get ready and get set up. So yeah, it was brilliant when it worked, in fairness, because we had practiced it so hard. But again, when we came out at the wrong side at the end, then it was disappointing, and it was a pity that it wasn't enough just to get us over the line on the day.
yeah. Because you have to. I mean, Mayo did it as well at times. You have to play with risky against Dublin, because you have to get that edge on them. And even actually on about the kick out, I think 2019, the 2019 final, the McCaffrey goal, I think Kerry pushed right up and Cluxton, I think Brian Howard set McCaffrey. It was one of those brilliantly set piece sort of goals, and that's probably what set Dublin apart from everyone else, that they could just manage those awkward situations when even Cluxton had that sort of zone on him.
Big time. And you see, at that stage, it was 3 years old, and you
Yeah,
nearly needed to be coming with something different again, because they had such good fielders. Like, obviously Brian Fenton was their main fielder, but someone like Brian Howard, and it was totally planned. They put it out over Gavin White, and Brian Howard would have a height advantage on Gavin White, and they, like you said, they just executed it perfectly. They had obviously practiced it, and then when you have someone like Jack McCaffrey to take off, then it was a brilliant goal. But again, no more than our ones in 2016. You could see it was straight from the training ground, and it
yeah,
was something that they had worked on. And that's why we figured in 2016 it could be the winning of the game, because that surprise element, and that when you bring something like that, it was no more than when McGuinness landed into the semi-final in 2011, and the whole team were behind the ball, and the crowd were booing at this thing. Again, there was a shock element there, but as soon as a team sees something, they start
yeah.
trying to figure about getting around it the next time. So you only get that shock or that surprise element once, because after that the teams are so good and they're so well coached and everything else, it's going to be picked up on, and you're going to have to keep adding to it if you want to get the value out of it.
Yeah, I mean, a quick word on David Clifford as well. I mean, your last year you brought him in. Like, was there any pressure at all to bring him in straight away after minor? Like, some people might have said it was too soon. Other people said he has to come in, and then there was even talk at the time of even the AFL could be looking at him, to even prize him away. Like, you have to get him in now to incentivize him to stay with Kerry's. So what was the thinking? Was it just because he was too good that he had to come straight away?
Yeah, he had to come straight away. I met him, and I spoke to him about the AFL thing, but you knew he'd no interest in it straight away. What he wanted to do was play football for Kerry and play with his club. That was his ambition, and that's what he wanted to do. But no, there was no doubt in my mind. Look, it was time for him to come in. We had actually considered bringing him in for the All-Ireland semi-final replay in 2017 because he would have been playing with the minors today, the drawn game when we drew with Mayo. And for the replay, we did think about it. And look, we figured at the time it wouldn't be fair in him, it wouldn't be fair in the minors. And even within our own group, it could be perceived as a bit of a panic move, that you're bringing in this fella that hasn't been with us all year. But we knew as a management, even going back then, that you'd even think about that. That you'd even thought like that across your mind. So he came in, and look, he was always physically a big guy anyway, so he was able to take care of himself. And the very first night he was in training, I remember one of his first touches, he got this unbelievable goal. He just turned and absolutely buried a goal. And Mikey Sheehy would have been one of the selectors with us, and I kind of glanced over at Mikey, and we both had a bit of a knowing smile that this fella wasn't going to need any time to settle in or anything. All you needed to do really was stay out of his way and encourage him and give him small bits and pieces of advice. But it was obvious from the off that he was something special, in fairness.
Yeah, and looking back on your time as Kerry manager, winning the All-Ireland, probably such a high. Do you look back with any regrets? I know it's a question that you could say to anyone on any walk of life, but how would you look back on the 5 or 6 years you had?
No, I don't. Funny enough, there I look back at it as an unbelievable time in my life. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was completely invested with it. I was completely obsessed, probably too much so, to be honest about it. And it's a demanding job, but it's a very fulfilling job, and it's a very fulfilling position. No more than any group, really, but I mean, the Kerry manager, if you're involved with any group and everyone's buying into it and everyone's trying to drive each other on and challenge each other, and there's a very positive vibe in the group, it's a lovely place to be. So no, I don't look back and say, oh, I wish we had done this, or I wish we did that. I know when I finished up, I was able to, which would have been my ambition starting out, if we won nothing, I was able to look at myself in the mirror and just say, did you genuinely give it absolutely everything you had? And if you can answer that, well, you don't have regrets, then, there's plenty of things I could have done better, could have handled differently. If I was older and more mature, I might have handled situations differently and so on. But in terms of looking back and saying, oh, I wish I didn't do this or that, I don't. I look back in the period and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the All-Ireland was a great win. And sometimes it's funny, you'd have league games away on the road where you'd win a tough league game in the middle of winter, and there'd be a fierce buzz and satisfaction in the group off that, which might sound unusual to people outside the group because they think it's all about the big days. I remember we won the league final in 2017 against Dublin and Croke Park. And again, look, leagues count for nothing in Kerry. It wasn't about winning the league. It was about beating Dublin in Croke Park because they were so hard to beat. And I think we had beaten them in the league in Killarney in 2015, and they hadn't lost a game in league or championship until that league final in 2017. That's how dominant and how good they were. So that was a great day out. And it was only a league final, and it was, to people outside the group, it wouldn't have meant much, but to us, it was a sign we were going the right direction. Now, we came a cropper against Mayo later on in the summer, but there was great days out like that where I thoroughly enjoyed it. But in general, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I was, privileged, and I felt lucky always that I was asked to do it. And it's a part of my life that I look back on with fondness, but at the same time, I don't look back on it and wish I was back there either.
Well, yeah, because I was just about to ask you, actually, would you be tempted at all to, even in the future, to go into, Jack O'Connor's gone back 3 times at Kerry, or even take a new challenge in another county? There's a vacancy in Roscommon there if you're interested in putting your name in the ring there.
Yeah, no, I couldn't ever see myself managing another county, to be honest, Sarah. I just find it, I couldn't manage against Kerry.
Yeah,
I just find it very strange. There's something, I think when you're involved in your own club or your own county, there's something in you inside in your kind of soul that kind of drives you to another level that maybe if you're involved with a different group, you wouldn't quite have. But in terms of Kerry, I don't know. I don't know. I wouldn't. You never say never, but at the moment it'd be a definite no because I think. Look, I think that Jack has, and he mentioned it himself, is the fact he's retired from teaching. He has the time to put absolutely everything into it, and I think if you're doing it, that's the way it has to be. I think you have to be able to put your whole time into it to do it to the level it needs to be done
yeah.
now. So in the short term, it's not something I could see happening. So I feel that between playing and being involved as a selector and being involved as a manager, in management alone, I was involved for 9 years. Between I was 6 years the manager, I was 2 years a selector with Jack. I was in charge of the under 21. So I've spent, I feel almost like I've done my bit and I really enjoyed it. And there's loads of other lads within the county that are champing at the bit to get a cut at it as well. So I'll be happy out to support them from the sidelines rather than putting myself in the firing line again.
Yeah, and lastly, you're doing a bit of work with the Sunday game and writing with the Examiner. How have you been finding that sort of even new chapter, if you like, in regarding GA?
Yeah, thoroughly enjoying it. I have to say, Dara, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like, I had written a column with the Examiner before when I retired from playing initially, up until I went back in with Jack as a selector, and I always enjoyed that. And obviously, since I finished up in management, then I got the opportunity with RT, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I have to say because I wasn't sure if it would be for me or if I would be for it, but. I just find that it really keeps your interest and focus in the game. And, like I mentioned to you earlier, I had a great summer going around to different games because, in general, when I was with Kerry, you'd have a very narrow focus on Kerry and
Yeah.
maybe your next immediate opponent, or you'd be keeping an eye on the Dubs. But, it was a kind of a narrow enough focus where I was up in Ulster a couple of games this year now, and I really enjoyed it. And being above in Castlebar for the Galway Mayo game and things like that. So, I have to say I'm thoroughly enjoying it so far, and it's the different roles between doing the co-com or being on the live panel or on the Sunday night show and writing your column. Then they're all kind of different in their own ways, and getting used to that is a learning process as well. But I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, because even on the co-com, it's probably difficult, or it's a difficult thing to to take or to get your technique right, and even trying to call things as it happens. Like, you have the luxury, obviously, if you're in the panel, that you can look at numerous replays, get what you're about to say in your head, and prepare it. Whereas in a live game, you have to kind of make your mind up fairly quick. You don't want to be one of these to sit on the fence, if you like, either.
Yeah, no, and it's funny. I really enjoy the co-com because of that. Because I think you have to be really tuned in, and you're reacting to a game in front of you, and there's nothing rehearsed. There's no, rehearsed is the wrong word. There's nothing kind of. It's very pure because
Yeah.
you're literally saying what you feel in the moment. And of course, there's times you're wrong, and of course, there's times you make mistakes and everything else. But at the same time, it's an enjoyable role. And in fairness, I've been on with Dara Maloney a good bit, and I was on with both Jerry and Marty as well, and they're just so professional and so helpful and everything else. And I think that makes the role a bit easier then when you're with people that are so experienced in it, and they're so, kind of helpful and willing to support you and giving of their time. That makes it a bit easier as well. So no, I must say, like I said, particularly the co-com, I didn't know how that would work out, but it's something I've really enjoyed this summer, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, looking ahead to next year already, to finish up, Kerry the team to beat, I'm sure, in your eyes again.
They are, but like, no more than what we said at the start. You have, like, there's going to be new managements in a lot of big counties. Dublin are certainly going to be back champing at the bit. Galway are going to be trying to add a couple of players to their squad over the summer. Armagh lost to Galway in penalties, and the next thing they're looking at Galway level after 65 minutes in an All-Ireland final. You mentioned Roscommon earlier. They beat them in the Division 2 league final last year. So there's a load of counties that are going to be fancying their chances. You'd hope from Kerry's perspective that there'll be growth and in their confidence and belief and know-how after getting it done this year. But the one thing about that is that there's a bullseye in your back for every game you play next year, which they haven't dealt with yet. And I think that was one of the things that made the Dubs the champions that they were, because every game they went out, the other team was going to be playing 10 or 15% above their level to have a cut off them. And they still beat all comers. So I'm hopeful that Kerry can get to that level in terms of dealing with them as well. But it'll be a great challenge for them. But they're in a good position pushing forward, absolutely. But there's plenty of other teams chomping at their heels as well, which is good, which is great for the championship for next year.
Brilliant, Éamonn. Thanks very much for your time and coming on.
No problem, Darragh. You're more than welcome.